Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is A Song of Ice and Fire live stream. We are going to be looking at the Queens of Westeros. We're going to have quite a broad interpretation of that, so whatever you would like. We've got the queens that we know about: Cersei, Daenerys, Marjorie, perhaps going back in history, looking at a few of the Targaryen queens, whatever you interpret from the title, really. So we've got that to dive into. Just before we do, what I try to do just at the beginning is give you a little flavour of some of the things that have been going on in the big wide world of genre TV and film. It's been quite a quiet week, to be honest, after the excitement a week or so ago of the big announcement from The Lord of the Rings, from Amazon, about the Lord of the Rings TV show. Took quite a while to digest all of that. If you're interested in that, then go back onto my Twitter is probably the easiest way. They released a still shot from episode 1, which is very exciting, and gave us a release date, which is over a year away, so slightly less exciting, but a long time to be building up towards it. Nothing particularly new this week, but I would put a date in your diaries: 23rd of August. If you've got Netflix, that is when we are going to see Nightmare of the Wolf, which is the Witcher prequel, Vesemir's origin story. Really, it's I think it's quite exciting. I think that this is going to give us a new, but a bit of the history of The Witcher, which actually we've not got huge amounts about, and an insight into one of the key characters in the Witcher universe. So keep an eye out for that. Also, just while I'm here, quick shout out to the moderators. If you're watching this live, the moderators do an amazing job, and a particular shout out today, Cracking Tacos. Hope you are feeling better soon. So let's get straight into this. We've got the Green Knight. Reflective Rambling, spotted that. The Green Knight has opened. This is very exciting as a film. This is Dev Patel is starring in it. And The Green Knight, for those who don't know, this is a great Arthurian legend, fantastic story. It has opened in America to, I think, quite good reviews. Unfortunately, in the UK, they've pulled it. It was about to be released, I think, this week because of COVID. Damn you, COVID. No new release date yet, but I'm very excited about it. So if you have seen it, then do let people know in the chat if it is worth going to. It's something I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super sticker. I hugely appreciate that. And we've got... let's start with some questions from my patrons, shall we? Stephen Dillon. This is a question saying, what do you think the Three Queens Littlefinger, or who do you think the Three Queens Littlefinger were talking about are? Also, do you think Queen in the North is in Sansa's future? Mara-Lee, I know you were also asking about the Queen in the North. So the quote that Stephen's talking about here is... it's quite a curious one. Littlefinger comes back to the Eyrie after he's been in King's Landing. He returns to the Eyrie and Sansa's there. He's his usual very creepy self with Sansa. And then he basically says, it's all terrible. I've been hoping for a long period of 3-5 years maybe where I can build up my schemes, but it seems actually there's quite a big mess going on now. He says, what little peace and order the 5 kings left us will not long survive the 3 queens, I fear. Now, this is a fascinating quote, because then Sansa goes and says, the 3 queens? Who's that? And Littlefinger basically just ignores her and carries on. So who are the 3 queens that Littlefinger's talking about? Well, the 5 kings, first of all, this is the War of the 5 Kings he's talking about. The implication is that after the War of the 5 Kings, because they're pretty much all gone now, who is left? Who are the 3 queens? Well, 2 of them, I would argue, are very straightforward. Cersei is the queen, the Dowager Queen, Queen Consort, not Queen Consort, Queen Regent. She is effectively, or technically, ruling in for Tommen as his mother. She is there as queen, but We also have Marjorie, who is married to Tommen and is therefore Queen Marjorie. We have two queens. There's this huge power play, the last book or so, huge power play going on in King's Landing with these two queens. So those are two. Who might the third be? Well, this is a little harder to say exactly. Perhaps he's thinking about Cersei, perhaps he's got not Cersei, Daenerys, perhaps he's heard rumors of her, but I think it's more likely, given the fact that he then immediately segues into, so I've brought forward all my plans, and here are my plans. You, Sansa, are going to marry Harry Harding, Harry the heir, and this is going to bring you, and let's see, I might still even have the quote up here. No, I haven't. I moved on to something else when I was having a look. But he then says, and that will bring us basically the Vale and Winterfell. Now, that is fascinating. The Vale, that's what he's wanting from Sansa. He's wanting the Vale and the Riverlands. Let's not forget, he's actually technically, according to the Lannisters, he's the in charge of Harrenhal, and he's also the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands. So he would have, on that count, 3 of the 7 kingdoms. So this is his power play. And he wants Sansa to be queen in the north. How might he go about doing this? Well, clearly Robb was king in the north. Then we've had the Boltons taking over. But there's a vacuum, a Stark power vacuum. Who's there? Bran and Rickon apparently are both gone. Jon is at the wall. Arya has disappeared. Who's the only Stark around that he thinks he might be able to put in Winterfell? Sansa. So I think this is a little bit of a hint into what Littlefinger's plan is. He thinks there's 2 queens down in the south, 1 queen up in the north. So Britt Logan, thank you. It's a very generous super sticker. Thank you very much. Just saying you're amazing. Thank you. I do really appreciate that. Thank you. Laura Sevenan saying Marjorie doesn't really have power. It's Cersei, Dany, and Sansa. Littlefinger has plans for Sansa, and Cersei and Dany are going to cause lots of destruction. Yeah, so I mean, Dany's the other option. Marjorie is a queen. There is no doubt about that. But he is talking about Westeros. This is the other reason why I think it's probably Sansa, Marjorie, and Cersei. He's talking about Westeros. At the moment, then in the books, Dany's not really looking to invade. She's been hanging around in Slaver's Bay. She's trying to take over Meereen. Oh, she's in Meereen trying to rule it. There's this isn't a thing that's going. She's not currently one of the players in Westeros. So that's why, I mean, yes, she's more powerful, more important in the grand scheme of things, but that is why I think from Littlefinger's perspective, he counts Sansa as part of that 3. Luke Morano, thank you very much, saying, hey Rob, you said in a live stream that you think Jon could be burned when he comes back. Is there any evidence he has fire resistance like Daenerys? Well, no. In fact, quite the contrary. Jon has actually got a burn already. He's got a burn on his hand, and he kind of he spends a long time. It's one of these weird references George R. R. Martin uses a lot, which is clearly going to start coming into. It's going to have some bigger purpose at some point. But he's often kind of like flexing his hand because it sort of aches. He burns it right back early on in book 1, if you remember, when Othor, the White who comes down south of the wall, attacks Jeor Mormont. Jon saves the day. Really, it's the Raven and Ghost who save the day, but Jon plays his part and he gets burned. So he's not fire resistant. It's probably worth pointing out the Targaryens themselves, that they're not fire resistant. They can still be burned. The bodies of Targaryens are burned. That's how dead Targaryens are dealt with. That's how they get rid of the bodies. They just have a higher tolerance to heat. that is what it is. Now, what I said there, this isn't directly about Queens, but I'll quickly round this one off. When I've said or speculated that Jon may be burned when he comes back, the reason is that Jon, I think most people agree that Jon's body will be put in the ice cells at the wall at Castle Black. It will be frozen. How it will have to be unfrozen, that's not going to happen simply by leaving the body out lying near the wall, because it's very cold there. So there will have to be a fire to melt the ice. And at some point, they may decide they even want to burn the body. So that's why I think if the body is going to be brought back to warmth through fire, it's not an exact science. There's a fair chance there'll be some kind of scalding or something along those lines. Back when entertainment was gold, good name, saying, may you talk about Azor Ahai? Well, again, not a queen. I'm happy to sort of digress. Happy to talk about Azor Ahai. I'm not entirely sure what you're wanting there. I think it's quite important to distinguish. I'll say a couple of things if you just want me to randomly talk about Azor Ahai. I think it's quite important to distinguish between Azor Ahai and Azor Ahai Reborn, which is Azor Ahai is the legend. Azor Ahai Reborn is the prophecy that Azor Ahai is going to come back again and do what Azor Ahai did the first time around. So they're very different. One of them is looking back, one of them's looking forward. And the other thing I would say is that we don't, well, two more things I'll say. The first is we don't actually have huge amounts of detail about this. This is one of those legends that, because it's an Essozi legend rather than like The Last Hero, we get a reasonable amount about that. Then we don't actually get the details. We get a lot of the story about how he sort of created the sword Lightbringer. Beyond that, not much about what he actually did with it. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is that we shouldn't, George R. R. Martin is very clear, is that we shouldn't take this as a literal promise of what is going to happen in the story. The thing he cares about most is how people react to it, the fact that people believe it, the fact that Melisandre in particular is absolutely focused on believing in this. That is what is important to the story. It's her driving the action and her belief driving the action, not whether Azor Ahai as a prophecy is real. I certainly suspect once the books are all done, we will still be looking back and arguing about who Azor Ahai Reborn actually was. Kelly Johnson, will protecting Sansa play a key role in Jon's decision to kill Dany, like in the show? I'm just trying to think back actually to the show as to what reasons they gave for Jon killing Dany in the show. I mean, I got the impression on the show that the thing which pushed him over the edge was Tyrion's little speech to him. And yes, part of that was he was mentioning Sansa and, what's Dany going to do? Will she allow Sansa to be staying up there ruling the North? There was an element of that, but I think it was more him seeing what she's was like on the show. We've obviously not got there in the books, but on the show, all the soldiers lined out, giving this kind of speech about how she has to go and attack people to the ends of the world. That was the kind of thing that Jon, as a right-minded person, wished to oppose, and he chose the way to do that. Will he kill her to protect Sansa? I think there might be an element of that. I think it's probably just Jon. He never wants power. He doesn't like power. He sees what power does. And so I think that there will need to be some trigger for him. I do firmly believe, I've made a video well before season 8 called Will Jon Kill Daenerys? I firmly believe he will. The exact trigger, I don't think we yet know. But Sansa's quite possibly one of them. Protecting the family. Jon will very much be embracing his Starkness. And if Dany is seen as a threat, then yes, that could create a rift of some kind. Just quickly checking through. Garland Tyrell, thank you so much for the super. I think that's a super chat, but I didn't see a question attached to that. If you did have a question, just try and. Oh, here we go. How do you think the trials will go down? Okay, so this is the trials of the queens. We've got two trials. We've got Cersei. We've got Marjorie. Now, they're both on trial for all kinds of trumped up charges. I will get into that with Marjorie in a bit more detail, but also to do with adultery and things like that. This is a political power play by the Faith of the Seven rather than actually about the truth of it. How will it is that there is no way Cersei is going to allow herself to have a trial in any way, shape, or form. And as for Marjorie, if she has the trial, then I actually think there's a chance that she could get off. But because I think that the evidence against her is actually quite weak. As I said, we'll get into that. I've got a question from one of my patrons about that. I'll get into that in a little bit later in the live stream. But the key thing is that Cersei is not going to allow herself to have a trial. And because of where she's at in the story, Kevin Lannister has just been killed. The Tyrells are probably going to be framed for it, or Varys is framing the Tyrells for it. She is going to want to do something to get rid of the Tyrells. She's going to do something to get rid of the High Sparrow. It may not be exactly the same as the blowing up the Great Sept, but it'll be something very similar. That is how it's going. I don't think we're actually going to see the trials per se. I think that Cersei's going to find a very blunt instrument as a way of getting out of this. Question from J. Brandt. Are there any famous queens outside of Westeros? Yes. Now, the further east you go, you actually get more matriarchal societies. I think the one I would probably highlight is the Isle of Leng, which is a big island, an ancient island, an ancient civilization, two different cultures within it, different parts of it, and it is ruled by a god empress. So instead of having a god emperor, there's a god empress who has two husbands, one from each of the different parts of the island. So, and this is carried on generation after generation after generation. There's also probably, if you go all the way back to like the Great Empire of the Dawn, then you do get the Bloodstone Emperor and the Empress there, that all connected up with the First Long Night, is probably the most famous example. So yes, there are, but it's still the majority case that rulers are male rather than female. Kelly Johnson, do you wish there had been a Daenerys-Cersei face-to-face confrontation on the show? Well, it depends what you call a face-to-face confrontation. I mean, they certainly had a few times when they came face-to-face. Then, so there were in the Dragon Pit, and then also in the last season, Cersei standing on the wall and Missandei being beheaded. That was certainly effectively a face-to-face between them. I think the two actors would have done a fantastic job face-to-face, but I think it's the distance actually worked. I mean, there are many things I suspect most people would say they may well have wished to change about season 8, but I think that the distance, the point was that they kept a distance between Daenerys and Cersei, allowing them to therefore be working through intermediaries as proper queens would. So that kind of worked. Yes, it would have made for good telly, I'm sure, but not. I don't think it was necessary for the plot. Spotted someone in the chat. Oh, Andrew K saying Cersei will likely get some sort of bigger wildfire moment. She already enjoyed her taste of it when burning the Tower of the Hand. I agree absolutely. So this is in the books. There's this. It's a really good chapter. You get Cersei. She burns the Tower of the Hand. So after Tywin is killed and Tyrion escapes, and basically she's there going, well, where are all these tunnels? Are there people? Are there murderers running around in the tunnels all over the place? How do we know about this? What's going on? And she decides that she gets people going hunting all the way around, and eventually decides that she's just going to get rid of that whole tower. And she gets wildfire in, and she burns it down. And she has a little party outside for it. She has everyone gathered around, and they all there, and they look, and it blows up, and then the flames burn for a while. It's a fascinating kind of character portrait of her. And she loves it. She's enamored by the flames, to the extent at which Jaime's there, and he comes in and he says, you look just like the Mad King. And, I know what he looked like when he's thinking about using wildfire. That's a bit scary. So, yes, that is definitely foreshadowing or laying the ground for her to do a bigger thing with wildfire in the future. This is why blowing up the Great Sept does make sense in the books. It has been that there's a lead up to it. It's not just a show thing. I think that there's a big lead up to. In fact, it makes more sense, character sense, in the books, I would argue, than in the show, where it made sense there on the show as well, I should probably say. And it was one of my favorite beginnings to episodes, that long, almost like a montage with the mounting music, just showing the different characters, Marjorie and the High Sparrow down in the Great Sept, Cersei there sipping the wine, Tommen preparing to go out. All of that build up was absolutely brilliant. Taryn Giles, thank you very much. Saying, hi, Robert, thank you for all the wonderful content. What do you think is up next for Queen Marjorie, assuming she remains queen after her trial, if there is one? And how do you think her story ends? Well, I've been talking about this just now, and I think that is the answer. I think that Cersei needs revenge. She sees herself as being her father's daughter. She sees herself as being the heir of Tywin. Tywin would never let a Lannister be killed without exacting revenge. A Lannister has been killed, Kevin Lannister. She is the one who has to exact revenge. Varys is going to be framing the Tyrells. She is going to take revenge on the Tyrells. Who does she take revenge on? She hates Marjorie, absolutely loathes her. So makes absolute sense that she is going to take it out on her. She's tried to take Marjorie down already by trying to get her convicted of all of these horrendous crimes, but it's just not working. So she's going to have to take a much stronger approach. She's already fallen in love with wildfire. I think she's going to die. Lyle Hammack saying, hey Robert, it is kind of off topic, but if you could take a female character from Lord of the Rings and put them in A Song of Ice and Fire just to see what would happen, who would it be? And also the other way, in A Song of Ice and Fire character to Lord of the Rings. I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, I would love to see someone who is quite pure, like Galadriel from Lord of the Rings in A Song of Ice and Fire, because whereas Tolkien created these sort of bubbles of what the world should look like, the Shire, the Lothlorien, places like that, George R.R. Martin doesn't. Everything for him is dirt and grime and could could be corrupted. So to drop someone like Galadriel in would be absolutely fascinating. That said, watch out on Monday. I've got a video on Galadriel where it's my character takedown of her, tongue-in-cheek. She's not as perfect as she always appears on the movies, so do keep an eye out for that. But in terms of a character going the other way, I don't know. I think it would be someone like Tyrion, who just wants to explore. There is so much in Tolkien's world, but he kept it really geographically quite tight. Tyrion would explore, would try and find things, would try and understand things, and I'd love to travel with him. Question from Aaron Daniel, saying, just a super chat I would have sent a while back. You answered my question about Area's ice on Twitter, so thanks. Oh, well, you're very welcome. I mean, I can't promise to answer everything on Twitter if I get asked them, but I do hang out on there every now and then. So if you catch me with a bit of time, then I will happily respond. Reflective rambling. Thank you. Picking up a question for someone else. I love it when people do this. It's very generous of you. Thank you. Estelle, how big of an inspiration was Wagner's Ring Cycle to Tolkien? And do you think Rembrandt's Night's Watch, or Night Watch, sorry, inspired Martin's Night Watch? Right. So on the Ring Cycle, yes, it definitely was. He was very aware of it. He acknowledged it. But with Tolkien, I mean, I think inspiration is probably a good way of saying it. He took inspiration from lots of places to create his own world, and his own world started being created when he was a child. This was not a thing that he sort of created and then stopped creating. This was his entire life's work. So yes, Wagner's Ring Cycle, he has acknowledged that's there, but also Norse mythology, also huge amounts that he took from folklore across the piece. He took inspiration from the places he grew up, the places that he visited. There are so many different places that he took inspiration from. So yes, it's definitely there, but I don't think we can. I don't think it's a sort of a cut and paste job. I think it is very much an inspiration. As for Rembrandt's Night Watch, if you get, I'm trying to remember there's one of Terry Pratchett's books, the late great Terry Pratchett, and I'm sure somebody will in the chat will remind me of the title of the book that is inspired by that very painting. As for whether that inspired the Night's Watch, George R.R. Martin, don't think he said as much. I may have missed it, but I mean the big inspiration, I think, for him was, as we know, Hadrian's Wall, that kind of wall at the end of the Roman Empire, where all the Picts and the Scots were to the north, and the Roman legionaries were stationed up there, and they were, if you've ever gone up to Hadrian's Wall, there's not huge amounts there, but you can see the remains. You can see where the camp was. You can see the sort of the stone surroundings, and it was exactly as the Night's Watch forts are. Backs up onto the wall, and they have everything they need in there. This bunch of soldiers who just live their lives there, and then there was a little village a little way away where they did a bit of trading and maybe sort of nipped away for a few things that they probably shouldn't have been doing. So that's the feel, the legionaries at Hadrian's Wall. So he may have taken inspiration. I've not heard it myself, but it's entirely possible. Archive saying, could Cersei have turned out as a better person? I mean, she could have. I mean, anyone can become a better person, in my view. I don't think we're set in our fate from an early age. Where Cersei was brought up, as so many of the main characters we have in A Song of Ice and Fire, in extreme privilege. She always got everything she wanted, pretty much, and the few things she didn't get, clearly they stick with her. They really hurt. They're these huge ships on her shoulders. Could she have been better? If she had been brought up by Joanna Lannister as well as Tywin Lannister, I suspect all the different characters who knew Joanna Lannister say this. I suspect that she would have had a more positive role model. As it was, she didn't. She largely seems to have, because her father for huge amounts of time was Hand of the King. He was away a lot. She largely ruled the roost, with people doing exactly what she said all the time. Joanna Lannister, it's also worth pointing out, she knew about her and Jaime and separated them. So if Joanna had survived, then probably, this was when they were very young, then probably there would have been more oversight, shall we say, and that definitely will have had an impact. So yeah, there were many different options. She could have married Rhaegar. That would have been very different to marrying Robert Baratheon as an experience. Who knows? There are lots of different ways around this. Yeah, C. McBroom saying, don't see Joanna as a flowers and sunshine type of person, but she would have taught Cersei how to manage people better and not go into things head first, guns blazing. As Joanna Lannister, we read about her lots of different angles. The key thing we find out about her is that she seemed to make Tywin happy. She seemed to know how to manage him. He managed he ruled the kingdom, but she ruled him, was what we're told. So she does seem to have a slightly subtler way of doing things, subtler than Tywin's anyway. Donald Peoples, since you'll be leaning more into Tolkien content, will there be a future Traveller's Guide to Middle-earth? So Tolkien content, yes, I'm doing more Tolkien content, absolutely. I know some people say, oh, does this mean you're not going to be doing A Song of Ice and Fire? I'm carrying on doing A Song of Ice and Fire, do not worry. I love A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm going to carry on doing A Song of Ice and Fire. Live streams, there will be some more Tolkien ones, but I'm not giving up on doing the A Song of Ice and Fire ones. I'm not giving up on doing A Song of Ice and Fire videos either. They are definitely coming. And when we get House of the Dragon, do not worry, I'm going to be covering that fully. Ditto Winds of Winter. So A Traveller's Guide to Middle-earth, I would actually love to do sort of one of these kind of behind the curtain kind of things. As content creators, you will often find us sort of talking about copyright strikes and things like that. Some areas it's easier to do stuff in than in others. Now, one thing which everybody is learning, the Tolkien estate and everybody who's involved in having the rights of Tolkien are very, very, very hot on all of this stuff. There's a big channel that had to change their name because of this, because History of Middle-earth, for those who don't know, had to become History of the Ages. They're now The Broken Sword, if you want to check them out. They got forced to change their name. There are lots of people who've had videos taken down because they quoted something from Tolkien, but the quote went on for a little bit too long. I personally suspect that doing a traveler's guide, a sort of a sub-creation within Tolkien's world, is going to be off limits for them. So I think probably not. I would love to, but I suspect probably not. Question from Kelly Johnson: would Dany get the win in hand-to-hand with Cersei? So who would win in a fight between Dany and Cersei? I mean, I think Cersei's probably slightly made of sterner stuff. I don't know. Dany is a very slight woman. But she's got a dragon. It would never come to hand. So yeah, interesting question, but it's one of those things that it would not happen. Let's get to another question from my patrons. Siler Jensen, hi Robert, I'm wondering about Marjorie. Yes, so I said I would talk about Marjorie in more detail. In the TV show, there seemed to be at least a grain of truth to the allegations towards her in the trial at the Great Sept. How will that play out in the book? Has she and her cousins indeed been seducing various men? Okay, so the accusations against her are, to start with, trumped up. Definitely. Osney Kettleblack is somebody that Cersei makes make up a lie that Marjorie has been sleeping with him. She sent him to sleep with her, and she basically just stayed out of his way all the time. She had spies who were there looking at her all the time. We have reports back on everything that she does, who she does things with. There was nothing. There was no dirt. Cersei was looking absolutely everywhere. And then finally they get these kind of charges. There's this guy called the Blue Bard who they managed to get after torture to admit to playing in the background while Marjorie and her cousins invite lots of people around for all manner of debauchery. So those are the trumped up charges. They all recant later. And the sole bit of evidence that does stay there is the fact that Grand Maester Pycelle, who it has to be said is now dead, so will not be able to add anything to what we know of this, said that he took, or Marjorie asked for moon tea from him. Moon tea being this thing that's in the world of Ice and Fire, women drink to have an abortion, basically. And Cersei goes, aha, that's it. And this is used as a big bit of evidence. But I would suggest that it was worth looking at the detail of that sentence. One of the things of that interaction between Cersei and Pycelle is desperate. He thinks he's going to be slung back into the black cells by Cersei. He's pleading with her to go easy on him, and he gives her a bit of information. She latches onto it, and he's trying desperately to get away. So this isn't a straightforward interaction between the two of them. And one thing George R. R. Martin does a lot, particularly with Sir Barristan, it's one of the most frustrating things that I find in his writing, particularly of the character of Barristan, but here with Pycelle, is somebody starting saying something and then getting interrupted, or we don't see the end of it, or something along those lines. That exact exchange, we have Pycelle says, and Marjorie asked for moon tea. It was for, and then Cersei snaps, I know what moon tea is for. And then she goes off and starts talking about something. And so Pycelle doesn't actually get to finish his sentence. Now, she obviously interprets this as being, she's been ordering moon tea because she wants to abort all these children that she's been having because of all of her illicit debauchery. That is what Cersei wants to believe. So that is what she hears. But that's not what Pycelle says. He just says she asked for moon tea for ... It could have been for one of her servants. We do not know. He did not say who or what it was for. So if that is the only evidence, and that does appear to be the only evidence, then it's not strong evidence, it has to be said. The other thing that I would kind of throw into this is that George R. R. Martin very clearly has taken inspiration here from what happened with Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII. Now, so what happened there was that Henry VIII wanted to get rid of her, and he basically said, "I just find something." And so Thomas Cromwell, his prime minister and fixer, went off. They found a bard who confessed under torture, got a whole load of other people who then also confessed under torture. They later, most of them recanted as well, and she was killed despite always maintaining her innocence, and she probably was innocent. That seems to be what he's going for here. So do we know for sure? We can never know for sure in George R. R. Martin's world. We don't have a Marjorie POV chapter. We don't know 100%, but Cersei had spies looking for evidence, couldn't find any. She sent somebody out in a kind of a what she thought was a honey trap. That didn't work. She managed to extract evidence from people only under torture. And then the one bit of perhaps evidence, she cut somebody off when they were actually explaining a bit of a caveat to it. So I don't think it looks very likely that she did do any of those things. Kraken Tacos saying, please cover information on the first and second age of Middle Earth. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Kraken, for the super chat. So actually this gives me a chance to segue. I love it when I get this chance to segue seamlessly into my Patreon. Patrons, first of all, thank you. I always thank my patrons. But the reason I'm mentioning this now is that one of the benefits I have, it's at the $10 patron level, is a chance to influence future content that I make. Just tell me what to do, basically. And I'm doing that at the moment. So I've got a poll out there for my $10 patrons saying, what do you want me to be covering in future Lord of the Rings live streams? And I've given a few different options. One of them is looking at different ages of Middle Earth. So if you are at all interested in supporting this channel, now is a good time to join the Patreon, because you get a chance to influence what the live streams are going to be like. Link down in the description. So thank you for that. And yeah, I will definitely, at the very least, I think I've done a second age video already. I will definitely do a first age full video anyway, just in answer to that. And keep an eye out. I've got other videos coming out about things like the Valar, if you're interested in some of the ancient sort of knowledge about the world of Tolkien's Legendarium. AK Channel TV, do you think that Rhaegar married Lyanna, making her a queen? This is a really interesting one. I think probably yes. But I don't think it's certain. So the reason why probably yes is that I think that Rhaegar would not have wanted to have an illegitimate child. He was looking for his third legitimate child, and I think that he was going to want to have a legitimate child. So I think that he would have married Lyanna. Now, that obviously would have required a huge amount of toing and froing. Elia, I think, would have been actually happy for him to have a lover. That was absolutely fine in Dornish culture. But similarly, she liked him, she respected him, but she didn't love him. And if there were an agreement that her children, their right to line of succession, was not affected by this, then I don't think there would have been a problem. So I think all of the indications are that would have been Rhaegar's plan. The only question is whether he actually managed to do it before he died. So my answer is probably. I think this also adds to the is Jon the rightful king argument, because if people are wanting to put him on the throne, then their argument would have a whole lot more weight if there were somewhere a piece of paper that said, actually, yes, and this is the last remaining legitimate child of the crown prince of the last Targaryen king. That is a line of succession which is very clear, and you could argue very strongly that puts Jon in a prime position ahead of Daenerys. But if he was illegitimate, it definitely wouldn't. Question from Nemo Nova saying, I recently found a couple of channels here on YouTube that read the entire Lord of the Rings. I comment on them, but comment to them that the copyright doesn't expire until 2050, and then I report them. They're gone within a couple of days. Well, yeah, so that's it. It's the Lord of the Rings. I mean, to be honest, any copyright book, you can't read it out on YouTube, because this is how artists get the recompense for the art that they create. So the copyright rules are there not to annoy YouTubers. The copyright rules are there to support artists, which I fundamentally agree with. So yeah, absolutely, you will find that, and that's why. For those who don't know, I have a second channel, which is called The Well Told Tale. I narrate audiobooks on that channel. I narrate classic science fiction and fantasy. So if you're interested in the best science fiction and fantasy stories ever, we're talking like the creme de la creme. We've got the Call of Cthulhu, War of the Worlds, some tales from Arabian Nights, things like that. So if you're interested in that, go and check that out. But on that, I stick at the moment to public domain stories, because it's free for everyone. So yeah, that's how that bit of the world does work. Question from Cloaked One. Thank you very much, Cloaked One, picking up. You do this as well a lot. I really appreciate it. This is for Cogito Ergo. Please answer this to solve an argument. Would you say Cersei is a villainess? I think I'm probably not going to solve your argument unless one of you is arguing that George R.R. Martin doesn't have heroes and villains. He has characters with lots of shades of grey. So she is clearly someone who is going to cause a huge amount of damage, and has caused a huge amount of damage. There are certain amounts of villainess to her. I would definitely agree, but at the same time, George R. R. Martin, by giving us her POV, we're actually understanding her, and we're understanding her neuroses. We're actually learning to sometimes sympathize with her. She didn't have the love of her mother growing up. She was brought up by a very brutal father. There's a lot to sympathize with her. I mean, closer to villainess than not, I would say, but George R. R. Martin does not work in that black and white way, is my sort of answer to that one. Don't know whether that solves your argument for you, but that's, I think, the closest to where George R. R. Martin is. A little bit of what you fancy Gambit saying Marjorie was way too smart to get pregnant, especially with a strong female mentor like the Queen of Thorns in the wings. Yeah, I think that is very true. Nemo Nova saying, of course, I would never report you, Robert. Well, thank you very much. I would also never read the entirety of The Lord of the Rings. So that is... well, that's very kind, but hopefully you would never have cause to anyway. Catherine, and that's actually just complete digression. This is also why I don't tend to have things like music in the background of my videos and things like that. And this is, if you are a new, always just trying to share a little bit of wisdom here. If you are a new and young YouTuber, if you're just starting out with a small channel, if you're worried about any of these copyright issues, the simplest way is just to cut out all of the stuff that could be copyright. You don't have to have music behind your videos. You don't have to do video clips. You can do stills. You don't have to do extended quotes. You can do short quotes. That's the way to make sure you don't get copyright strikes. So you can play by the rules and still create great videos, is what I'm trying to say. As I say, quite a slight digression, but if you are a small YouTuber, if you're worried about this kind of thing, that's my experience. Catherine Furseth. Who died first, Rhaegar or Aerys? If it was Rhaegar, then his wife would never be queen because he was never king. So technically, yes. So Lyanna, if I said yes, I didn't mean that she was queen. She would have been the princess. So technically, Rhaegar died first before Aerys. Now, this is where, if you wish to get into the weeds of all of this, you can then start going, well, what does this mean for the succession? Because allegedly Aerys named Viserys then as his heir, presumably in the absence of also knowing that there were Elia's children there, but he didn't like her, and in the absence of knowing about baby John. So there's so many moving parts here, and who actually is technically the Targaryen heir that it is actually impossible to say who legally technically should be. So that is deliberate on George R. Martin's part. We are not supposed to go, this person is definitely supposed to be king or queen, therefore everybody else is in the wrong. It's about who believes that, who puts their power behind a certain person's claim. So Catherine, yes, technically Lyanna, same as Elia was a princess. She was already a princess of Dawn, and then she remained a princess, but of the Seven Kingdoms. Lyanna, if she were married to Rhaegar, would have been a princess. Question from Ivan R. How do you think Daenerys will leave Meereen when she heads over to Westeros? Will she just abandon the city without fixing any of its issues? I mean, this is the tough one. She definitely, so the most recent thing that George R. R. Martin has said, which has changed our understanding of Daenerys, was quite a long time ago. But when he spoke about the Meereenese blog and their interpretation of Dany's time in Meereen and what George R. R. Martin was meaning by that, what was he trying to do thematically and as a character for Daenerys, and George R. R. Martin basically said, it's exactly right. That is exactly what I was trying to do. So if you want to know, go and check out that blog. But there, the high level point there is that Dany, having gone to Yunkai and Astapor and left them, and she tried different things in each of them, and they basically both have reverted back to bad things. She tried to stay in Meereen, didn't want to leave it, wanted to stay there, to govern it well, to be a good ruler. But eventually she gives up on it. It's probably the wrong way of saying it. She is taken out from it, and she realizes that she is a conqueror more than she is a ruler. She is a Targaryen. She is this is her destiny. What she is like as a person is to be, and this is pushed on by Quaithe to this conclusion. She will be now fire and blood. That is what she is about. So what does that mean? That means her mindset about her role vis-a-vis Meereen has changed. She is no longer going to sit there making lots of compromises. She is going to leave Meereen really quite soon after she comes back. What will she do with it? Well, she will definitely try and leave it in a good state, I suspect, but it's probably also going to go back to something akin to what it was before, because that's simply the way that the world seems to be out there. on the show, she left. I always have mind blanks at the wrong moment. She left her lover Dario there, which seemed a little bit odd, but in the books it would actually make a little bit more sense, because she does probably need to marry when she gets to Westeros, and he does understand the people around there, so, and he's quite an ambitious sort, so yes, maybe he would be a good person to leave in control. He is indeed a leader and has lots of leadership skills, so he could do that. So I think she will leave it relatively quickly. I don't think she's going to give huge amounts of thought to it. Her bigger concentration is going to be on the bigger cities, Karth and Volantis, rather than dealing with what happens down in Meereen. Lock and Key Knives saying, I think there's any chance in the end of a Targaryen will grow again and become what they were. So I'm not quite sure I understand the question there, but do I think that there's a chance that the Targaryens will become what they were as a ruling family in Westeros? No, I don't. I think that we are seeing the bookends of the Targaryen time in Westeros being the first invasion, Aegon the Conqueror on Balerion with 2 other dragons and his sister wives, and then Daenerys on Drogon with 2 other dragons, and there will be other dragon riders along as well. Let's not go down that path. But those are the bookends. We get told again and again, Balerion and Drogon echoes. They're very similar. So that is very much the feel that we've got there. That in the same way that Aegon took over the 7 Kingdoms, it's going to be Daenerys invading, which is going to be the end of the Targaryen time over in Westeros. Sina Aro Jurgensen, thank you so much for the super sticker. Kelly Johnson saying, if Jon had Gary Moore play While My Guitar Gently Weeps when meeting Dany, would he have had a good chance of getting lucky that night? I'm not entirely sure I answered the question. I don't know which night that is, but While My Guitar Gently Weeps, that's George Harrison, isn't it? But Gary Moore is indeed an excellent guitarist as well. Okay, I think that's me caught up in the chat. Let's go across to questions again from my patrons. Matthew Hawkins. You've been keeping me going since lockdown. Love the work you've been doing. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Please tell me how you think Daenerys, this is linking up to what we've been talking about before, how you think Daenerys will rid herself of her useless husband in Meereen, Hizdahr zo Loraq. Also, can you advise me which of Andrzej Sapkowski's Witcher books to start off reading first? Well, I will come back to The Witcher in just one second. In terms of how Dany's going to rid herself of her husband, I think that's pretty much already happened, to be honest. After she's gone, Sir Barristan, I mean, I don't think this is actually what happened. Hizdahr was accused of trying to poison Dany. Sir Barristan basically arrested him, launched a coup. When she comes back, is Dany going to be in the mood for trying to figure out exactly what happened? No, not really. But is she going to like what Hizdahr was doing, which was starting to make a few compromises again? No, not really. She's not going to be in the mood for thinking about ruining Meereen. I think he's going to be killed. I think it's going to be as clear as that. I think that regardless of whether he did or didn't do the poisoning, Sir Barristan says he did, therefore he will get killed. I think it's as simple as that. As for the Witcher books, and apologies to any Polish people listening, I know I haven't quite managed to nail the author's name yet. I will try to get the pronunciation right at some point soon. But the Witcher books, now there are 2 types of book. We've got 6-part novel series, and then we've got 2 collections of short stories. Now, these are connected short stories, I should probably say. So the best place to start is probably with the short stories. Now, there are 2 there. There's The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. And start with The Last Wish. You will find quite a few of those stories were covered in season 1 of The Witcher on Netflix, if you saw that. So you will, and it kind of sets up a lot of the key themes, what's going on with Yennefer and Geralt, and also with Ciri, establishing what that dynamic is. And then the Sword of Destiny just sort of builds on that a bit more. When we get to Blood of Elves is the start of the first book of the series. When you get to that, then it's based on all of the bits of information we've already had drip fed to us through those short stories. So start there and then work your way through. They're very easy reads, it has to be said. Cloaked One, this is for Thomas D. Kirschmecker. Will Euron get a wife/queen/goddess? He does have bastards, but he doesn't really care for them, and he doesn't really have an heir. So, yeah, I think he will, and I think it's going to be Cersei. And that's for a lot of reasons that I've sort of talked about a few live streams ago. But in the visions that Aaron, the damp hair, gets, then yes, there is this woman who is there alongside him, Euron, which certainly seems to imply that there's going to be someone. He's trying to make a play for Daenerys. That's not going to work. Who is he then going to turn to? Well, if he wants to be king of Westeros, if he wants to rule it, then who better than a queen of Westeros, even if she's in exile, Cersei. So that kind of makes sense. And I don't think it's going to go well for her there at all. Is she going to be, you said, a wife/queen/goddess? I think he will probably go down a very, very dark route with her and play to all of her most brutal instincts. The dynamic that I think has the greatest potential for chaos there is actually not so much her and Euron, it's Qyburn and Euron. If you could imagine what the two of them together could wreak, then it's pretty horrendous. Question from Lyle Hammack saying, geez, Robert, now you have me thinking of a young, ambitious Galadriel versus Cersei fighting for control in King's Landing. By the way, how are you going to cover House of the Dragon and Amazon's Lord of the Rings TV shows? Yeah, so young, ambitious Galadriel. She definitely was young and ambitious. When we saw her on the in the films, in the books, then she's a lot older and wiser. How am I going to cover Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings TV show, whatever it's called? We still don't know what it's going to be called, and House of the Dragon. Probably the ways that I've previously covered both the Game of Thrones TV show and also the Westworld TV show when it's been on. So if you've been watching the channel for that long, then that's the kind of way that I plan to cover both of them, assuming they're going to be coming out on a weekly basis. I hope so. I think all the indications that we've had suggest that they will be. But what that means is that I will carry on doing my live streams. I will also do a second live stream each week, probably before the show. And then after the show, I try within 24 hours to do a breakdown of the episode. So while it's still fresh in everyone's minds, do a sort of just an explanation, talk through of what we just saw, not just telling people, this is what we saw and then that happened and that happened. I like to treat people as intelligent viewers, but adding in a little bit extra, some stuff from the books that perhaps you didn't make the links to, maybe a few little Easter eggs, things like that, adding to our understanding of what happened there. Then I try and do a trailer breakdown if I can, and maybe, and or depending on how much time I have to devote to it, and or a video on whatever issue has been thrown up. There's always an issue after each episode, something that people are asking questions about, so I just try and do a video explaining what it is that people are asking about. Cloaked One, this is for Eric Og. Thank you again for picking this up. Who is your personal favourite queen? I mean, I don't know about my personal favourite queen. Is an odd one. There are a lot. I will come on to her in a bit. Queen of Thorns is a little bit of a cop-out answer, but I obviously love her. As for other queens, Marjorie is criminally underrated, I think, in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. I think that she's clearly clever. She clearly knows how to play the game, and she's outmaneuvering Cersei almost at every turn, and left to her own devices would, I suspect, have become a very, very powerful queen over the Seven Kingdoms. So I do quite like her. Going back in time, I think Queen Rhaenys seems like a whole lot of fun, and Queen Alysanne, who I've got a couple of questions on coming up later as well, seems really good, and having her heart in the right place, actually caring about the small folk, which a lot of the nobility frankly don't. Okay, question from who should we go to? Diego Godoy. Hi there. Hola, Robert. Hola. Saying, I've started to read The World of Ice and Fire, and I was impressed by the huge influence good Queen Alysanne. The links are going well today. The good Queen Alysanne had during the reign of Jaehaerys I, and maybe even saying it was co-ruling would be more accurate. Would you consider her the most influential queen in the recent history of Westeros? Yes, I think I probably would, and I think most people probably would. In terms of queen being sort of the wife of a king, obviously we had, and we have to keep on saying this, but the record books wrote out Queen Rhaenyra. She was queen. She ruled from King's Landing for 6 months, but because her side lost the Dance of the Dragons, that just got expunged. So yeah, she was definitely a queen. George R. R. Martin said that we should probably go ahead and imagine Queen Alysanne as like the Eleanor of Aquitaine of Westeros. Now, this is one for the history buffs, but she was an astonishing woman. If you ever go back and look through her history, she was, first of all, the wife of Louis VII, I think, of France, then the wife of Henry II of England, and she was a redoubtable leader. For both of them, she was effectively a co-regent, if not more, and she owned huge tracts of land. She was managing the affairs across all of these kingdoms. An incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent woman. And George R. R. Martin says we should probably imagine Alysanne as being a bit like that. So yes, very sort of important and influential. The two things that are definitely there that they're called Queen Alysanne's laws, because they are actually things that basically she lobbied for. She identified an issue, she lobbied for it, she made it happen. These are widow's laws. So previously, a widow of say a landowner would not have any rights at all, and they would often just get chucked out onto the streets when their husband died. And she came up with the laws that says no, they have to be kept at least in the manner that they previously were in. And then there's also the law about the right of the first night. So the lord of the manor, after her, was no longer allowed to go in on a wedding night and just do what he wishes with random brides in his area. So two very good, very upright, very excellent laws that she was personally involved in identifying the need for and making sure that they happened. Silkwill91 saying, could the Fisher Queens have been descendants of the sisters of the only begotten son, the God on Earth Emperor? Okay, so the Fisher Queens, this is from the World of Ice and Fire. They were back in the Dawn days, really. Over in Essos, they were based in, I forget the name of the sea that was there because the sea has largely disappeared now, but in the middle of what is now the Dothraki Sea was this large sea, and the Fisher Queens lived there, what appears to have been a matriarchal society, and then eventually they, as all of these ancient empires do, they eventually died out. So that's who they are. And the question is, could they have been descendants of the sisters of the only begotten son, the God on Earth Emperor? So this is the Great Empire of the Dawn, which is in the area of Yi Ti. They had the earliest possible empire. And yes, so could the two have been around at the same time? It's possible. The thing with the Great Empire of the Dawn is that this is effectively legend within George R. R. Martin's world. It's effectively, we should treat it the same kind of way that we treat things to do with Azor Ahai, the last hero, things like that. They can't be taken as literal truth. And because the first emperor lived for, I can't remember, 1,000, 10,000 years, whatever it was, a stupidly long time. And then all kinds of remarkable things were ascribed to them. They were a god, apparently. So we shouldn't take it all as literal truth. Were the two coterminous? My general take is possibly the Fisher Queens were a bit earlier, even than the Dawn, Great Empire of the Dawn, but we don't have all of the information on that. George R. R. Martin has not given it to us. Londok 20 saying, hello, Robert. What happens with Queen Jane? If she is somehow rescued in the Wind's prologue, what is her role going forward? Does she have any say in or claim to the North or the Riverlands? Also, if Lyanna was indeed married to Rhaegar, she was technically a princess, correct? Well, on that last bit, on Lyanna being married to Rhaegar, so if Lyanna was married to Rhaegar, then technically she would have been a princess. I assume that's what you mean, rather than referring back to Jane Westerling, because she would not. She's a queen technically, or now a dowager queen because her husband died. But the question about does she have any claim? No, is the short answer, because she's a queen by marriage, not by birth. So unless Rob specifically in his will named her in some way, then no, she had absolutely no claim. Now, we're pretty sure, and I talked a lot about the will actually last time, but we're pretty sure that Rob named John in his will as his heir rather than anything else. That seems to be the clear implication of the conversation he had with Kat, and then the fact he got everybody to be signing this. There was no implication that Jane was in any way mentioned here. So does she have any claim to the North or the Riverlands? No, but she has this kind of, if she does escape, I'll come to the possibility of that in just one second, then she would have very much a role that people would rally around her. This would be seen as a huge victory if we get somebody who effectively escaped the Red Wedding, who got away with it. So she wasn't there, but but the attempt to be doing away with the Starks has clearly failed here. So might she be released? The Winds of Winter prologue, George R. R. Martin has hinted, pretty much said, that we will see her in the prologue to The Winds of Winter. Now, that doesn't mean it's from her POV. She is currently being transported across back to the Westerlands and to be there under the protection of the Lannisters. Now, there are lots of different groups in the Riverlands at the moment, any one of which would have an interest in preventing this from happening. You have the Brotherhood Without Banners, Lady Stoneheart. This is her daughter-in-law. She would want this not to happen. We've got Nymeria's Super Wolf Pack, who have been attacked proactively. They're not just random wolves attacking random things. They're proactively attacking Freys. So there's them as well. And we also have the Blackfish, who escaped from Riverrun. And we have the Blackfish's garrison, who were freed. Jaime freed them and basically said, you leave your weapons and armor. You can go off. They will also be wishing they're on Team Stark very strongly, so they will also be interested in saving her. So there are lots of people who might. So that we're going to see season 1. The prologue of The Winds of Winter is going to be an escape attempt, or an attempt on the caravan to stop this caravan taking her away to the Westlands and to rescue her. Will it succeed is a different matter. Probably is the answer. Jay Brandt, will Asha end up on the Salt Throne? What's your best guess for her future? Yeah, I've not looked at Asha as much as I probably should have done. I think there's a fair chance that she could do. Victarion's not going to make it. Euron's not going to make it. Then who left is there really? She did have a good shot at it, and she nearly got people on her side before Euron comes in and basically stole the show. So she would have a good chance at the end of all of this to get the Salt Throne. I don't see why she shouldn't. I think she will aspire to it, and I think she will probably get it. The only question is whether or not this is done with Theon, if Theon survives. I like the idea that happens. I don't think George R. R. Martin's necessarily going to give us the thing just because it's a good idea and would be quite nice. Question from S. Nitch saying, do you think the story will rise above the all too common trope of what I call silly girl syndrome? This is where a previously savvy woman suddenly starts making huge mistakes because she can't control her emotions. Once you start to see it, this is everywhere. So I certainly hope so, and I certainly think that the signs are good for George R. R. Martin. The best bit of hope I've got is for something like Sansa, whose story arc seems to be the almost complete opposite of that. She definitely was what you would call a silly girl in book one. I'm rereading book one at the moment. Go onto Twitter if you want my thoughts on it. Sansa is very frustrating to read in book one. She simply does not know what is going on around her half the time. And that's it's getting to the point where you simply can't understand why. She didn't understand what all the fighting was going on around her when her father and all of the Stark retinue were killed. She just didn't understand that. Then she didn't understand what was happening when she was being manipulated to write the letters. Then she didn't understand when she's in the Great Hall and everybody's sort of ignoring her. Why on earth are they ignoring me? She just simply doesn't seem to understand what is going on. And she is still holding on to this hope that Joffrey loves her. So she starts off incredibly frustrating, but the story is getting her. She is growing. I mean, she was still a young girl at the time. We can understand where it was, but she is growing through this story. The biggest fear I think a lot of people have is with Daenerys, because on the show, the way that the showrunners described what was going through Daenerys' mind did not necessarily help. Let's put it that way. She, when she decided to firebomb King's Landing, the reasons were manifold on the show, but some of them were not particularly described very well. It's the impression was given that this was just, it all just got a bit too much for her. That I don't think is where the books are going with her. That doesn't mean that she's not going down a dark arc. George R. R. Martin has basically confirmed that she is going to a darker place, a more fire and blood place, a more Targaryen-y, dragon-y place. That is where she is going. But that doesn't mean that this is a silly girl thing, the emotions getting all too much for her. This is a Targaryen thing, which I personally think is very different. Where I would also put this, and I'd love people's comments in the chat on this, where you see this, but George R. R. Martin has very clearly, and we had it from that quote from Littlefinger at the beginning, he's very clearly gone from a very strong patriarchal start to a position where the most powerful characters increasingly are female. You get Daenerys, you get Cersei, we have the Queen of Thorns, Marjorie, Sansa is gaining in power. So that is that's not an accident on his part. That is a deliberate move. It will be interesting to see whether this changes his way of showing how things operate, how people operate as rulers, or whether he presents it as everyone is corrupted by this lust for power, which is where it seems to be going at the moment. Question from Duke the Nuke saying, hey Robert, new here and want to say I enjoy your content. Thank you. My question is around Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns. In the show, we saw her and her house end. We can assume Cersei will destroy the Sept and kill Marjorie in the books, but the Tyrells will be far from destroyed once this happens. How do you think she'll maneuver in the books? Which Targaryen will she align with, if any? Okay, so she definitely does. Sorry, let's rewind for a moment. The situation we were talking about a moment ago was that Cersei has or is about to discover that Kevan Lannister is killed, and she is about to think that the Tyrells did it. The situation within King's Landing is a very sort of tightly balanced one between the Tyrells and the Lannisters. The Lannisters technically have, on paper, have more power, but the Tyrells, they have more soldiers there. The Lannister soldiers are all off in the Riverlands trying to sort stuff out there, and they've got people like Randall Tarley, and obviously we've got Marjorie, who's gaining increasing influence over Tommen. So the power balance is quite precarious. Now, if we make the assumption that Cersei, as I think is a reasonable one, Cersei will blow up the Great Sept or something very similar, killing Marjorie, killing the High Sparrow, what will the Tyrells do? They will no longer wish to be maintaining this power balance with the Lannisters. They are not going to allow Cersei to carry on ruling. But Cersei will probably claim the short-term victory. Where do the Tyrells look to for support? Well, Daenerys is still a long way away at this point. Daenerys has not started setting sail. Daenerys is still lost somewhere in the Dothraki Sea. So she's not really an option for them. Who is a very real option is Fagon, who has launched an invasion which is literally within a couple of weeks' march of King's Landing. He has got the Golden Company already on his side. If rumours be true from the pre-release chapters of the Winds of Winter, then Storm's End very famous old castle has fallen to him already. He's gained a lot of the Stormlands. I think we will see Dawn coming in behind them as well. The Tyrells, the obvious answer for the Tyrells is to also come in behind Fagon. And that will allow them to push Cersei out. So that is where I see this going. I see Lena Tyrell will be staying back in Highgarden, but be very happy for that to be the case. This does lead still, though, you're right, there are lots of Tyrells still hanging around all over the place. There's some quite important ones, the Garland Tyrell and lots of others still who are, they weren't on the show, but they're in Highgarden. So we're not just going to have her on her own in Highgarden waiting for the Lannisters to come and attack. But it has to be said that Highgarden is not the most easily defended place. It's described as being a very beautiful castle, but it's not the best defended castle. And where is it? It's just up the river from Old Town. Euron is going to take out Old Town with fire and magic and all kinds of horrific things. So if he then comes up with an alliance with Cersei when she makes her way over to Casterly Rock, the most obvious place for them to go next is actually Highgarden. That it's halfway between Casterly Rock and the Old Town. So I think she's a goner either way, but I think that they will throw in their weight behind Fagon. Okay. Nick Grimes saying, I thought Sir Pounce was Azor Ahai. Sir Pounce is definitely Azor Ahai. Garland Tyrell, I was just talking about you. Thank you very much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that one. Okay, I've just seen it now, saying, hypothetically, out of Cersei, Marjorie, and Dany, who do you think would have been the best overall ruling queen and why? Well, Marjorie, I mean, the more I look into this, you'll probably starting to get this feeling already. I think she's actually quite clever, and she does seem to help the small folk, whether that's out of actually caring about the small folk or it's out of a smart political move. I don't think it makes much difference in the end. She is actually helping out. She does seem to be building an amount of love amongst the populace of King's Landing, which is a good thing for a monarch to have. So Dany, yes, I know Dany has lots of admirers. In the books, she's not yet done a hugely good job of ruling. If we're asking about ruling here, Yunkai, nope. Astapor, nope. Meereen, very, very tricky circumstances. She was doing quite a lot of good stuff, but she did have a revolt against her. And the result of what she'd previously done in places like Yunkai and Astapor is now coming back to attack her again. So she's not proven herself yet as a ruler, whereas I think Marjorie is starting to prove herself as a ruler. It's not to say Dany can't do it. It's just to say that she hasn't yet done it. Reflective Rambling, picking up a question from Jamie McKenna. Hi there, Jamie. Saying, assuming both Cersei and Dany die, do you think we will see any queens ruling in the known world, particularly in Westeros, by the end of A Dream of Spring? Well, this is at the risk of sort of answering a question from later from my patrons. This is I think Sansa is the main possibility. On the show, obviously, she ended up being Queen in the North, and I think that there's a fair chance that she may well do in the books as well at the very end. already talked about Asha. She is the most likely candidate at the very end to be taking over the Iron Islands. So, I mean, question is about Dawn, who might be ruling Dawn. Who knows who's still going to be alive there. But with Sansa, the character arc that we were talking about a bit ago is really important, because it's not just about her becoming more badass. This is about her. She has been horrendously treated for pretty much the entire story. From the moment that her father is taken and the Stark retainers killed, she is on her own all the way through. And who are the people who are there, who are mentoring her, looking after her? Yes, we get some kind of like gruff people who turn out to probably have a best interest at heart, people like the Hound and Tyrion. But we have Cersei, we have Littlefinger. She's not had the best of upbringings. She is still a child. It is an upbringing. So where she is going to end up, and she's increasingly thinking about all of these people and safety. Where is she going to end up? At a place of needing safety. She's heading towards Winterfell. Winterfell will provide safety, but the only time that she can truly guarantee her own safety is if there is nobody in charge of her, if she is the person who is the mistress of her own destiny. And that ultimately will happen if she's queen, and only if she's queen. So it makes sense as an arc to end up with her there. Question from Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi Robert, thanks for keeping on making content during summer." You're welcome. I'll just quickly pick up on that as well, I don't know how far into the live stream you are, but away into the live stream. Yes, I'm going to carry on making content through the summer. I will be taking a bit of time off. So next week there's no live stream. After that, I'm getting back into grind mode, so it'll definitely be every week all the way up to Christmas, I hope. But the videos themselves will keep on coming. Don't worry about that. I've got quite a few lined up for over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks. So the content will carry on coming all the way through the summer. There are different kinds of queens. This is Catherine's question. You have reigning monarchs, of which there doesn't seem to be many in the world and the history of A Song of Ice and Fire. Then you have queens married to reigning kings, and the third unofficial queens, like the Queen of Thorns. How have queens of all sorts been regarded through history? Being queen is closely related to having power, making the question also about who the most recognized women of power throughout Westerosi history have been. Thank you. Yeah, so lots of different thoughts there. Yes, I think what George R. R. Martin has done, I think, quite well is recognize, if he's trying to reflect our own world, to recognize the fact that whereas women may have often had the most power, they have not always had the title to back that up. Rare indeed in Western Europe, at least, which is where in Westeros, that's the sort of the spiritual home is. Rare indeed was the woman who was actually the most titular, most powerful person. Yes, the history of there are some powerful queens of England, Elizabeth, for example, or Victoria later, but in the main, it was the men who were ruling. Now, it does. So you're also talking about the most recognized women of power throughout Westerosi history. The other thing he does, and he did this, I felt, brilliantly in Fire and Blood, is to show that there were powerful female Targaryen queens all the way through. There are, every single generation, there's either someone who should have been a woman who should have been queen, or someone who actually was ruling and powerful but never actually got the official title. And this starts all the way back at Aegon. We talk about Aegon and his sisters. Aegon when you just read between the lines, when they were ruling, Aegon didn't spend much time actually ruling. He spent most of his time, at least half the year, more than half the year, away from King's Landing, either out around his new empire, effectively going and cementing relationships with all the lords, or he went back to Dragonstone, which he preferred. He didn't actually spend much time in King's Landing. The people who did would be his two sister wives. They, when they sat on the Iron Throne, they were ruling. It's not like they were just like they're ruling instead. They ruled as him. They were there as a thruple, effectively. So that was they didn't get the official title of being king, but they were there as queens, and they were ruling queens in actuality, if not in name. Queen Alysanne, we've already talked about the fact that she clearly she was very powerful. She was effectively co-ruling. Queen Rhaenyra was queen for 6 months, but got expunged from the history books because her side lost. You get again and again and again, you get these people who were actually ruling, but still, if you go back to the history books, the Targaryen rulers, you'll just see this long line of men, kings. It's when you dig into it, you find that actually the real story is very, very different. Okay, question from Googly Woogly saying, hey, hello, just a modest thanks for another great discussion and an extra thanks to the mods too. Excellent. Well, I'm glad that the mods getting love. I always appreciate that. Kelly Johnson, would Bruce Timm's style work for an animated Game of Thrones? I don't know the answer to that one, I'm afraid. Perhaps somebody in the chat can help out on that one. Question from Bo Riley saying, hello, Robert. I apologize if this is too far of a stretch, but it has been bothering me for some time. It involves Queen Cersei's champion, Sir Robert Strong, aka the Zombie Mountain, and his possibly missing head. A skull was sent to Dawn. This is ostensibly Gregor's skull. If true, there might not be a head beneath Sir Robert Strong's helmet. However, I keep returning to the point in the Feast for Crows when Cersei is presented with the head of a dwarf that did not belong to Tyrion. Qyburn, of course, volunteers to put it to good use. Is this head now part of Robert Strong? Is it possibly the skull sent to Dawn in place of Sir Gregor's? I suppose it could simply demonstrate Qyburn's interest in all things life and death, and it might simply adorn his laboratory. So, what's going on with all the heads here? Now, the first thing to note is Sir Gregor, Robert Strong, Zombie Mountain. We never see whether he has a head. His helmet is effectively soldered on. It doesn't come off. No one ever says it. The Kingsguard muttering about it. Never see him take off his helmet. Never see him eat. Never see him sleep. When you look in the little visor slits, it's just blackness. You can't see anything. The implication is that there is no head under there, which is a really horrifying kind of thought. There has been, and this is not just you who's had this thought, it's a thought that's been going on for a while. There was Cersei basically puts out a bounty for Tyrion's head, which means that lots of people send her heads, and one of them is indeed a dwarf's head, and it is noted as being an outsized dwarf's head. Tyrion also is, incidentally, his skull is larger than normal proportions, but she says it's not him, and Qyburn takes it. Now, some people have said, is this the skull that then gets sent off or then appears down in Dawn? No. is the short answer. I think is that the one that appears in Dawn, a skull goes there as a sort of a peace offering to the Dornish, to the Martells, saying, okay, this is a peace offering for Oberyn, who died, and he did kill the Mountain, so here's something for you. This is a massive skull, we're told, and everybody thinks, yes, this is definitely his. So I don't think there's a chance that this is an outsized dwarf skull. The Mountain is a completely different scale. He's 8 foot high. He's just ridiculous. So this is not a normal sized skull. Could it therefore be the skull on Robert Strong's shoulders? We don't know all the ins and outs of what Qyburn did. Perhaps it's good for us not to know all the ins and outs of what Qyburn did. If, in order to reanimate Robert Strong or Zombie Mountain, he did need to have a head on the shoulders, then maybe he stitched that one on. It does add to this kind of Frankenstein feel of what's going on there, which is definitely the feel that George R. R. Martin is going for. So it's possible. I'm of the view that the skull that went down to Dawn was the Mountain skull. Robert Strong has not got a head, and that head is just part of what Qyburn does. He's always asking for humans and bits of humans and all the rest of it, and he's saying, "Oh, can I have this one? Is that all right? Can I?" So that's just what he does. I don't think there's a huge mystery here. I mean, it's possible. You can't rule it out. It would add an extra layer of gruesome, but I don't think the evidence is there. Okay, I think that's me caught up on the chat. And let's go to a question from Mara Lee, saying Dany is seen more like a conqueror than a ruler, especially on the show. Do you think, given the right circumstances, she would have made a great queen over Westeros? I think this is a fascinating one, because we don't actually see her. I was kind of critiquing her role as being ruler over the cities in Slavers Bay. We don't actually see her in a ruling somewhere where she fits in. Maybe she doesn't fit in anywhere, but definitely she's not seen as one of the people of Slavers Bay. If she went to Westeros, if she had been welcomed with open arms, if she was allowed to just rule without, if the Targaryen dynasty had carried on and she'd somehow inherited, would she have made a good ruler? I think there's probably every chance she would. Certainly thus far in the story, from what we've seen, she seems intelligent. She seems to have empathy. She certainly seems to care about some important issues like slavery. So I think there's every chance that, yes, she could have been a good ruling queen. It's just that in Meereen, when she got there, the problems were already stacked so high that she's just firefighting. If you read her chapters in Meereen, each chapter is another issue, something else that she has to deal with, a new big horrible thing happening. She didn't get to rule over a peaceful time. So yes, I think there's a very good chance that she would, if the world had been different. Lyle Hammack saying, what kind of queen do you think Rhaenyra would have been had she won the Dance of the Dragons? I get the feeling that she would have been a competent ruler and would have maybe opened the door for other queens to follow. Once again, thanks for the content. Well, this kind of flows, I think, from the Dany thing. So Rhaenyra did rule. She did rule for 6 months. She was not a good ruler. And I think that's fair to say, but she was not ruling in an easy time. She was ruling in a time of war. She was also ruling in a time when there was not much food. She was ruling at a time when there was literally zero money in the the coffers. She was ruling at a time when she was in the middle of a huge civil war. And she had been through huge amounts of personal loss over the course of the previous year or two. So this was not a good time for her to take over on a personal level, a good time for her to be taking over as queen. When she was there, she got a lot wrong. If she had inherited back when perhaps she should have done, and there hadn't been a civil war, would she have been a good queen? Well, quite possibly, yes. Quite possibly. One of the things about so we get Viserys basically taking over from Jaehaerys, who had left a very good kingdom and all good, and then Viserys takes over and is he doesn't seem to be a particularly competent king, but he doesn't rock the boat, and the Seven Kingdoms carry on being happily ruled, and there's no big problems. If she took over from that great inheritance, lots of money, everything's fine, no huge conflicts on the horizon, she probably could have been a very good queen. We see that when she was young, she was the realm's delight. Everybody, and that's not just because she was young and pretty, but also she was charismatic. She had leadership qualities. So, yeah, there's a very good chance she could have been. But by the time she did inherit the throne, this is the tragedy, and she was getting paranoid. She was not caring about the fates of the small folk. She was just focused on getting what she thought was hers, and that was not good for her. Andrew Case saying Rhaenys, the queen who never was, would likely have been a much better than Rhaenyra. She seems much more stable and suited, perhaps. That is very true. Reflective Rambling saying one thing we often ask is good and bad ruler. Good is subjective, not necessarily the same as compassionate. Sometimes there are hard choices that are better for a country or people long haul. Yeah, absolutely, I agree. So I certainly get the impression that someone like Viserys didn't necessarily have it in him to be making the hard choices. I think, and good or bad is not how George R. R. Martin works. Popular, he definitely understands, and effective, he definitely understands. Good, I mean, we get Jaehaerys is painted as being the great Targaryen ruler, the wonderful leader who gets everything, but he doesn't get everything right at all. When you actually read through the story, he gets quite a lot of stuff wrong, but he does leave the kingdom in a better state than when he inherited it, which is a positive thing. Question from Nenyan saying, "Hi Robert, my question is about a very different queen. The story about the Night's King and his corpse queen is mentioned a few times in the books, but the story usually focuses on the Night's King. Her description seems to indicate that she was an other, but she seems to be the only female other. There is also no mention of what happened to her after the Night's King was defeated. Are there any theories about who she was or what happened to her?" And Nintendo saying, "Hey Robert, since she counts as a queen, what do you think that the Night's Queen was, a white or an other? She's said to be a corpse, but how could a simple white have so much power over a Lord Commander?" So, yes, this is a queen. We have very little information. This is a legend, so we can't take everything literally. But yes, the information that we have, it sounds like she was an other. I mean, just if she was a corpse, then one can't imagine somebody falling in love with a corpse. A white that we've seen, they're not particularly attractive, and he saw her from afar and found her attractive, so that doesn't seem to work. However, the others have a beauty to them. George R. R. Martin is very clear that these are otherworldly. They're not just like we saw on the show, there is a grace and a beauty to them. These are like fairies, the elves, the Sidhe of sort of Celtic legend. They are beguiling. Now, we don't know what a female other would look like, and that's a question for a completely different live stream. I suspect why a female other. But if this was a female other, then yes, we would expect her to be a bit like that. So, was she an other or a white? I think an other. What happened to her is a fascinating question. We are not told is the honest answer. The story basically goes that the after the Night's King had been effectively had her as his consort, as he'd turned bad, and then we get the King beyond the wall and also the King of Winter, the Stark King, joined forces. They had the Horn of Winter. They blew it. Giants came forth from the earth, and the Night's King was his rule was ended. What happened then? We don't know. We simply do not know. We definitely do not know what happened to the Night's Queen, the Corpse Queen, the other. There are lots of suggestions people have come up with. Maybe she just went back away again. Maybe she is buried in the Winterfell crypts. There's, if you go all the way down to the very oldest bits, there's a caved-in section. No one knows what's back there. So lots of possibilities. My take is that I don't think the Winterfell crypts thing is right. The Winterfell crypts, the magic there is holding the spirits of dead Starks there in place. It's not holding others captive. And if they were going to do that, then surely just having an area that's impassable. That's not exactly how you do it, because people could clear away the rubble. That doesn't seem right. So I think she just, if we are to take this legend as sort of history, I think she just sort of went back and away again. She was defeated somehow. So that leaves open the question: if she went away, can the others survive for long periods? Might we see a female other? Who knows? It's entirely possible. She is a very mysterious character because we know so little about her. But the point is that the Night's King seemed to be offering up child sacrifices to the others. If she was an other, then to her, which seems to imply that this wasn't just a king and queen, and we're actually talking about him worshipping her. And we should not be talking about the Night's King as the fascinating character. He's actually not the main character here. It's her who is the main character, but history has recorded it slightly differently. So that's the fascinating tweak that I take from it, which is that we're told that this is the legend of the Night's King, but actually it's not. This has to be the legend of the mysterious female other. Sabrina Temi saying, hello, favourite. Oh, thank you very much. I just logged in, so forgive me if you answered already. Technically, do you not think that Dany's claim was lost when Robert won the war? Isn't it right right of conquest? Yeah, well, I haven't answered that, but the right of conquest is there. But the way that George R. R. Martin seems to treat this is the way that in sort of historic Western Europe, and in fact most of the world seem to treat this, is the person who everybody recognizes as being the ruler is the ruler. And Robert Baratheon was the ruler because everybody recognized that he was the ruler. That meant that the Targaryens weren't. If the Targaryens came back and swept Robert Baratheon from power, they would claim that they were the rightful rulers all along. and the history would be rewritten, and the official history would be, the Targaryens were off on exile for a few years and then came back. So that is what it is. That technically, there is no golden line of what the king or queen should be. It is, as you say, it's the right of conquest. Robert Baratheon, intriguingly, did try to, or if he didn't, the Maesters on his behalf tried to claim that he had a right to rule because of he had some Targaryen blood in him, so through his grandmother, and that was true. But then there were those who were Targaryens who were closer in line there. So it didn't really hold much water. That was used as a way to sort of paper over the cracks. So what you have is a situation, and this happened a huge amount of time across just taking England's history. You get, for example, Queen Matilda. She's not an official Queen of England. But at the time she ruled at least half of the country. But the person who became known as King Stephen won that battle, and she got written out. That is what happens in the history of Westeros. The winner gets to write the history, and they get to say where the golden thread of kingship goes. Question from Bo Riley saying, do you think that Queen Selyse will be responsible for the sacrifice of Shireen instead of Stannis, or a joint decision? Given the considerable distance between Stannis and the Wall and the far more nuanced political distinction between the King's men and the Queen's men in Stannis' army, I suspect the sacrifice will play out quite differently from how it appeared on Game of Thrones. What are your thoughts? Jamie Lannister in the chat just saying Stephen was a usurper. History hot take for you, love it. But returning to this question here about who is going to order Shireen's death. George R. R. Martin in Fire Cannot Kill a Dragon, which is a collection of lots of different interviews with the Game of Thrones showrunners, actors, behind the scenes people, and George R. R. Martin. In that he does sort of effectively say that Stannis will order the death in the books as well, which is intriguing for the reason that you say, which is that there is a huge amount of distance between the Wall and where Stannis is. And Stannis at the moment has got absolutely no way of getting to Melisandre. So the assumption is that the burning of Shireen is going to be in order for Melisandre to perform magic to improve the weather. Now, this is what happened on the show, but it didn't. It felt a little bit lame. In the books, the weather is horrendous. This is snow piling up. The road from Winterfell up to the Wall is effectively impassable. Stannis and his forces are freezing to death in the Crofters' village. People are dying. They're having to eat their horses. The cavalrymen are having to eat their own horses just to stay alive. This is really, really bad. And so this makes sense that Melisandre will do some magic to try and improve the weather, to push back the winter. And that would require a huge sacrifice. That does require Shireen. Now, how might Stannis authorize this? Certainly Melisandre could do that. Selyse could give the order. She is very much an acolyte of Melisandre. Other important people at the Wall, like Val, will also support this. The question is, how do you say that Stannis will support this? And the only clear answer is magic. That has to be how it is. It's either magic or ravens. If they have ravens with them that will be able to take a message up to the wall, and we haven't heard that they haven't, and he surely will have taken some ravens with him on his travels, then there is the possibility of some correspondence. But and other than that, Melisandre will be able to see things in the flames. So it's one of those things there. I struggle with this too, is the short answer, which you can probably tell from the way that I've been saying it. We know it's going to happen. George R. R. Martin has said that this is going to be Stannis who authorizes it. Exactly how he gets the message across, I do not know, because I think it's going to happen at the wall. And I don't think Stannis is going back up to the wall. So he has to send a message somehow. Sydney Rose saying, hello, Robert and His Majesty Dan the Dashing. Dan's not here. He did make a little cameo last week, but he's taken himself upstairs already. So with the lore around the ancient Fisher Queens, we were talking about this a moment ago, and how Martin likes to tease at real life, I find it interesting that so many of the matriarchies seem to predate the established patriarchies. It makes me insanely curious about the predecessors and contemporaries of Valyria and how these ancient powers reigned and lived. Yeah, so I definitely agree with this. It's fascinating. What does seem to be the case is that the matriarchies seem to, the further east you go, the more likely it's there. I've already talked about Leng with their god empresses. You also get the Jogos Nai, who are... They're a bit like the Dothraki, but they're sort of further east to the other side of the mountain range, and they're on Zorses, so zebras, effectively. And they have, it's not matriarchal, but they have a lot clearer split between those who rule the hearth and those who rule the hunt. They don't use those exact words, but that's what it is. And the power of the two is made very clear. So that culture is always there. Then you also get, as you say, the Fisher Queens. That seems that was an ancient culture over in Essos. Really, when you come over to Westeros, it's the older cultures that have remained. We find that north of the wall, that have potential matriarchies. North of the wall, we're told that some of the wildlings are not all the same. There's lots of different tribes, there's lots of different cultures. Some of these, we're told, are matriarchies. And we get a very northern house, pardon me, on Bear Island, when we get the Mormonts, which it's not a matriarchy, but they clearly have very strong warrior women as a culture, and women who can rule as an accepted part of their civilization. So it seems to be where civilization, in inverted commas, is not. That's where we get a lot more matriarchy, and it does seem to be a lot older. So yes, it's fascinating. I don't know whether this is deliberate on George R. R. Martin's part, but it certainly does seem to imply that as cultures within his world have developed, they have become more likely to be patriarchies than they were in the older cultures. Mel Misery Media saying, technically Brandon Stark is king of the North and Riverlands, and via the show we know he will be king of Westeros. Who will be his queen? Well, you say technically Brandon Stark is king of the North. This is one of the things which will be a plot point. So Bran Stark is, yes, the next oldest male Stark after Robb. So in the normal course of events, yes, he would inherit. However, everyone thinks he's dead. Now, as everyone thinks he's dead, Robb writes a will, and that will, we almost certainly know, will legitimize Jon and make him the heir. Now, he is obviously older than Bran, and if therefore he is legitimized, that then means that people will fall in behind him, as this is the last king's last will and testament, is that Jon Snow should be the next king of the North. Then people will fall in behind that. Others will, as you say here, point out that that will was done under a false assumption that Bran was dead, therefore it shouldn't count. But that doesn't stop people potentially wanting to fall in behind Bran. Also, there are, as we know, people who are falling in behind Rickon, and as we've spoken already, that's House Manderley, and as we've spoken about already, there are people who want to be falling in behind Sansa, Littlefinger, and co. So this is going to be one of the big issues in the Winds of Winter, is a Stark succession crisis. Not that the Starks themselves will be squabbling about who to take over, although there might be a few conversations among themselves, but there are going to be groups of people who will be squabbling about who should be the new king or queen in the North. You then ask about who will be his queen, who will be Bran's queen, and I think the way the show went with this was that he's not going to have a queen, and I think that's possible for the largely straightforward reason that he's actually going to still be very young at the end of this story. We're 2.5 years in actual time going through this, maybe 3. And Bran started it off as 6. So he's still only 9 years old. Even if we've got a couple of years to go, he's still only going to be 11 by the end of this story. And would we expect an 11-year-old to have a wife? Well, not necessarily. So I think that's, as long as he has a named heir to allow some degree of sort of assurance of succession, or a mechanism for having an heir decided, then I don't think they will need to worry too much about that. Cursed Ballerina, does Marcella have to become queen before dying to fulfill Maggie the Frod's prophecy? How do you think that will happen, and how do you think she will die? Okay, so this was because we get the prophecy from Maggie the Frog was that you'll have 3 children, and they're also, and I can't remember the exact quote, but they'll all be buried with gold crowns, effectively. So does she need to become queen in some way? I don't know if that necessarily has to be the case, but let's take this as read that Cersei does do something like the Great Sept blowing up. On the show, Tommen, as we know, didn't take that too well and died. He killed himself. Will that happen in the books? Possibly, but it's also entirely possible. George R. R. Martin gave us Queen Helena, who allegedly jumped out of the Red Keep to her death, and that was allegedly somebody pushed her. And this is entirely possible that this is what's going to happen to Tommen. And why didn't they show that on the TV show? Because this will be tied up with the Great Dornish plot. There are 2 of the Sand Snakes currently en route to King's Landing, both of whom have a huge grudge against the Lannisters, and yeah, they may well kill them. So that kind of makes sense, that he will die. If he dies, what then happens technically to the succession? Well, under the Lannisters, she probably would be the next in line. So if Tommen does die, then she would become technically queen, even if she's killed a matter of a few days later. So I think it's entirely plausible that, yes, all three of them would be ruling monarchs, but they just decided to do it in a slightly different way on the show. So is it necessary for Maggie the Frog's prophecy to be true? I don't think it's necessary because the language wasn't 100% clear, but I think it does work quite well for all three of Cersei and Jaime's children to technically, at the very least, rule but then die. Tragic, of course, but that's the I think the most likely way through this. So we've got a question from Sylvester Snow. Hello, Robert. Would you talk a little bit about the relationship between the sister queens Visenya and Rhaenys? How much love did they have for one another? Did Visenya really poison Aenys the First so her son could be king instead of Rhaenys? Thanks, as always, for all the great content. Well, you're very welcome. So the relationship between Visenya and Rhaenys was... We're not told all the details. It didn't seem an easy one, but it certainly seemed one of mutual respect. They were sisters, as well as both being married to the same man, and they seem okay with that. There's never any hint that there's a huge amount of rivalry between them over that, in any rate. Then, so they seem to have got on okay. The issue seems to have been not whether the two of them got on, it's a matter of who inherited, because they both had one child each, that then it's a matter of who makes the better king. And Aenys did not seem to be a particularly strong character. Now, when she died, when Rhaenys died, Visenya and Aegon both effectively went off on a killing spree across Dorne. They took out their vengeance on Dorne. And even when Aegon gave up his anger and accepted a peace treaty with Dorne, Visenya didn't like that. She didn't want that. So I think the idea that there was any kind of aggravation between the two of them as sisters, I think that's not, there's nothing there. So I think that they were okay. The issue was after Rhaenys had gone, Aenys took the throne. Visenya did not think that he was the best person for it. She thought that her son was the best person for it. She thought that Aenys basically admitted it by giving the sword Blackfire, Aegon's sword, to Maegor. So that was where the point of tension was. The question whether Visenya possibly poisoned Aenys is an odd one, because we're not really told much. We're told that she did look after, when he had a bad spell, he was quite a sickly child. All his life he was quite unwell. And she did look after him at some point, and he seems to get better. So the chances, she had the chance to kill him if she'd wanted to at that point, and she didn't. But it's... so my take is no. And we have to also say that in Fire and Blood, George R. R. Martin shows again and again that the Maesters, any hint that there's a woman dabbling in magic, they are immediately a monster. They're immediately suspected of doing terrible things. They're a witch. This happened with Visenya. She was cast in a very bad light in Fire and Blood because she was a magic user. Now, she may well have been a bad person doing terrible things. We do not know, but it happens every single time. If a woman is using magic, then they're looked upon very, very suspiciously. It feels to me more that Visenya tolerated Aenys while he was alive, and the moment that he was dead, she then went off and decided, no, now's the time. I'm not going to allow this to happen again. I'm not going to allow anyone from that side to be taking over. I'm having my son taking over now. That seems to be what happened, rather than her deliberately killing her nephew in order to have her son take over. So there's not too much evidence for it either way, but it doesn't seem needed. Welcome to your first live stream, Jervis Jermaine. Great to have you. So we've got Mara Lee question saying, in Fire and Blood, the emphasis was made on the kings of Westeros, but there are also great queens who had a hand in government as well, sometimes as co-rulers, like Aegon the Conqueror's sister's wives. My favourite, Alicent Targaryen. Part of the reason why I like her was her ability to communicate with people. Of the queens we know, who do you think made great rulers and why? Which queen would have made a great ruler if she had a chance to sit on the throne and truly rule? Well, I think there are a few. I've already spoken about Alicent and Rhaenyra quite a bit. Alyssa Velaryon, I think, is one that I would also hold up as being clearly a very clever woman, clearly someone who had the drive to be a leader. She protected her children from Maegor. She escaped and evaded his search for them. She managed to make sure that she, at the right time, once and really started pulling their weight, that her own personal power waned, and that was probably only fair because Jaehaerys was king. So I would hold her up as somebody who clearly had the skill set required, as well as these other people. So George R. Martin again and again showed us these Targaryens, Velaryons as well, who had either the makings of being a ruling queen or the who should have been. Keith Boynton. Actually, we're coming towards the end of my questions over on Patreon. So now is a good time. If you are in the live chat, now is a good time to be dropping a couple of questions in there. Apologies if you got lag there. A couple of people are saying they got lag. Hopefully it's come back for you now. Now I've got last question from my patrons, so now is a good chance to drop any questions into the chat. Keith Boynton saying, I know I'm not the first person to point this out, but it seems like the language in the Valonqar prophecy excludes both Jaime and Tyrion. The use of the Valyrian word strongly implies that it's a Targaryen being spoken of, and unless they're secret Targs, that doesn't apply to Cersei's brothers. Just as importantly, the prophecy speaks of the Valonqar, not your Valonqar. Prophecies are usually very specific in their wording. So doesn't this have to be Jon, someone of Valyrian heritage who's a little brother, but not Cersei's brother? I don't know if there's much narrative logic in Jon killing Cersei, but it kind of feels like he's the only major character who fits the bill. Well, I love this thinking. This is the Valonqar. For those who don't know, this is again a bit of the Maggie the Frog prophecy, and Maggie the Frog gets pretty much everything right. So everything that has happened so far, she's got bang on. So we should believe it. And basically, this is the person who's going to kill Cersei, and it's the Valonqar wrapping his hands around your neck. The Valonqar, as you say, it's a High Valyrian word, and this means little brother or possibly little sister, because the gender breakdown in the High Valyrian, it appears to be a lot more fluid. We haven't had that unpacked fully, it has to be said. George R. R. Martin has said many occasions he's not a philologist. He creates a few words for languages and that's it. Then we get other people who, for the TV show, put a whole lot more extra work into it. But when he was coming up with this, he was just coming up with a word in a foreign language. Now, the question, what you've sort of said is that that because this is a Valyrian word, this seems to imply that the person is going to be a Targaryen. I don't personally hold that that's necessarily right. It could just be an interesting word that has been included in there in order to cover up the identity of who it is, by George R. R. Martin or Maggie the Frog in universe, to try and make it not clear. A lot of her prophecies are not clear. Who is the younger, more beautiful one who's going to be taking everything away from Cersei? It's not clear. And these are the kinds of things that drive the narrative, because Cersei doesn't know, but she decides. She decides who she thinks this is. She decides this is Tyrion, and this pushes a huge amount of her story arc, because she has decided that this is Tyrion, so she needs to get rid of Tyrion. Could it be Jon? Yes, he's a younger brother. It could definitely, he could definitely fit under this. There are so many other possibilities. I've heard people suggesting this could be Tommen. This could be Jaime, because he's her younger brother. I think it is wide open. I'm still of the view that Jaime and Cersei will die together. The foreshadowing does certainly seem to be there. The amount of times they say, we came into this world together, we're going to leave it together, that all seems to work. Daenerys could be the little sister. She is the littlest sister of the Mad King. After all, if you're looking for a Valyrian person, she is the youngest of the three. We get Rhaegar the oldest, then Viserys, then her. So she is the youngest. So perhaps it's her. The TV show, one could argue it was her who killed Cersei, because it was her who caused the falling masonry. But that's not how the Valonqar prophecy is. The Valonqar prophecy is somebody putting their hands around her neck and killing her. I think Jaime is still the most likely. You asked for a reason why it could be Jon. Cersei, I think, is going to survive until the very end game, the sort of the scouring of the Shire, which is the way that George R. R. Martin describes how he's ending his story. By which we mean once the meta story has been dealt with, there's still a few loose ends. The secondary baddie has to be dealt with. The secondary baddie feels like Euron. If Cersei is with Euron and she's there, she will need to be dealt with as well. So who's going to be left to do all of this? Jon is almost certainly still going to be around, and he's going to be trying to clear up the mess. So he could do, if you're looking for a reason for it to be Jon. But I don't think it is. I think it's going to be Jaime. Kaios Ballerina saying, how do you think knowing she won't have any more children will affect Cersei's decisions going forward? On the show, she didn't seem to give it much thought, even after getting pregnant. Well, one thing that they did, I mean, they didn't follow through with it hugely, but I think they did quite well with the Tyrion-Cersei interactions, which was his clear understanding of the role that her children played in her own psychology. So, and what I mean by that is he said to her that was who you loved. That was where your love went. Without them, there's nothing left. There's just a need, anger and vengeance. And that does feel like what we're going to get from Cersei. She's increasingly through the story starting to lose her grip on a certain degree of lucid thought. But if the focus is so much on Tommen at the moment, that if he's taken away, you have to ask, where does she go now? What's left for her now? And there is a big gap there. We don't know where she would go, but it will have to have an impact on her psychologically to lose all three children, and not just that, but also because she believes the Maggie the Frog prophecy so much, she will see more and more and more things coming true, which means that she will start to see her own end. She will start to think, okay, it's soon, isn't it, that the Valonqar will wrap his hand around my neck. She will get more. One of the things ultimately from this is that she will get more and more focused when she sees Tyrion on opposing him and trying to kill him. Because if she does still think he's the Valonqar, she will definitely be trying to kill him. Sasuke saying, new Valonqar tinfoil, it is Val. Love it. A great tinfoil. Okay, let's do a few quick questions in the chat comments. Richard McCarthy, I still bet that Dany will turn out to be a false Targaryen, and this is what will, ironically, for a non-Targaryen, send her mad. Interesting. I don't agree with that. I think that she definitely is a Targaryen, but an interesting take. Fodder for foreshadowing. In Deep Geek, do you think Cersei will ever admit defeat, or will she die believing that she's won? I don't think she'll ever admit defeat, but I think that she will not necessarily believe she's won on whatever terms that she has. I think escaping her understanding of winning will probably boil down to escaping the fate that she felt was apportioned to her. She's been fighting against it. And this is the formative, that was the formative thing for her. She wakes up dreaming an old dream. We talked about this last live stream. The formative moment for her is that Maggie the Frog prophecy. And so that is what has been driving her. So Nick Grimes saying the brick that hit Cersei was made after the one that hit Jaime, making the brick the Valonqar. Yes, love it. Andrew K saying Euron as well is another Valonqar candidate of late. Yeah, I think there's I know a few people. In fact, I've got a video on this channel from a long time ago with Grey Area, I think, where she was putting the idea of Euron being the Valonqar. Jamie Lannister saying Cersei, this is very confusing. So Jamie Lannister in the chat saying Cersei will believe she's lived to fight another day. And Mike Hall saying, George R. R. Martin obviously believes women are capable of ruling as well as men, but do you think he believes women are superior rulers? And I don't think he's in the world of thinking that men or women are superior. I think that he's going to end up showing that everybody is flawed, and everybody's a shade of grey in some way, and everybody is covered by this lust for power, lust for the Iron Throne. So that, I think, is where he's going to end up, rather than saying women are better rulers than men or men are better rulers than women. That seems just a little bit broad brush for him. Sebastian Holden, thank you for the super sticker, just saying good job. Josh Sager saying, I don't think gender is particularly relevant to his classification of a good ruler. Much more pithily said than I did, but yeah, I think that's the point I was trying to make. C. McBroom saying, what about Brienne the Beauty as the younger queen? Yes, so Brienne is indeed potentially the one who takes from her all that she, again, I can't remember the exact words, but takes and if she takes Jaime, if all of her children have gone and all she has left is Jaime, and then Brienne in her mind takes Jaime, then yes, that is Brienne the Beauty taking away the last thing that she has. Andrew K saying, could we see a trial by 7 with Cersei in George R. R. Martin's version of The Scouring of the Shire that he's hinted at? I don't think so. I don't think at the end of it we're going to be in a world of doing things by the rule of the Faith of the Seven. I think that's going to be long gone. Troy Daliwal, mispronounced your name, apologise, saying, first time catching a live stream, love your work. Well, thank you, and welcome to the live stream. You've come quite near the end, unfortunately, but you're very welcome anyway. Okay, I think with that, I'm going to draw this one to a close. I have just a couple of random things just to end on. First of all, to remind you of, so I'm not on next week, but I'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Secondly, to remind you, if you are wanting to join my Patreon, it's the best way to support this channel. It's probably a good time to do it now. I've got an open poll there for my $10 patrons to let me know what Lord of the Rings live streams they'd be interested in the future. I'm still going to be doing a Song of Ice and Fire ones, don't worry, but I'm just interested. I had such good feedback from the Lord of the Rings one I did a couple of weeks ago that I thought I'd just find out what people want from on that. So now is your chance to get involved in that. And finally, this is a very random, but I was wondering if you have watched all of this live stream and you are watching it live, you could perhaps do me a favor. One of the things that I'm trying to do over on social media, places like Instagram, is just to do little snippets from the live streams, just to say, this is what the live stream was last time. And I've just been clipping the front bit, but that's a little bit boring, just saying, hello, I'm Robert, welcome to the live stream. So if there's like a bit that you thought was good, I would love to know. And you can put it in the comments afterwards, a little timestamp, just like a 10, 20, 30-second clip, something like that would work absolutely perfectly. So if you're feeling helpful, if there was a bit of the live stream that you found particularly helpful, then that's something you could do, which would be lovely. I'm sure I'll think of a better way of doing this in the future, but if you had a few minutes, then that would be very much appreciated. Okay, and with that, I think I'm going to start drawing this to a close. If you are enjoying these live streams, if you want to watch more of these live streams, there will be a link appearing somewhere around here if you're watching this a bit later. If you want to support this channel, the best way to do it is by going to the link that will be appearing about here, which is a link to my Patreon. Okay, there's fantastic chat today, some really good questions. Thank you, everyone. Take care, and I will see you again in 2 weeks' time.